actually, so I'm going to record now. It would not get me in any trouble if we're going to be talking about stuff from WandaVision on here, but I do have to actually teach. So, you guys ready? Say yes. Somebody say yes in chat or say yes out loud.
Yes.
There we go. All right, so here's what we're going to do. We got two things we're going to talk about today, okay? We're going to be talking about going from an equation to a graph and then going from a graph to an equation. These are our two things. Thing one, thing two. Okay, they're pretty easy, but it does take a minute to kind of remember them. And we haven't talked about either of these things in over a week. So here's what we're going to do first. When we look at this very first one, equation to a graph, I do want to make sure that we can look at this from the perspective of what the general form of this looks like. So every equation is going to have a y equals, and there's going to be an x. So there's always y equals stuff with an x. So what you're going to have in front of the x is going to be the slope, plus then you're going to have like just a number on its own. This is going to be your zero term, or the place that you start the graph. Now, let's do something for just a second. When we talk about this, and guys, like if you were to look back at the videos that I made from the 2 weeks ago that we did this is exactly the way that I talked about this. And you could look back and go, man, this seems real familiar. Yep. The slope is what we get when we're talking about our change in the y value over our change in the x value. So it's basically how far up and down do we go, or how far left and right do we go from point to point. Our zero term is always the place that we start, and it's always on the y-axis. So it's always going to be, the x is always 0, and then we're going to have some number to put this on the y-axis. Whatever the number is there, that's what it's going to look like. So, for example, what I'm going to do right now is to show you a quick graph, take you through what this is going to look like, and say, here's what we're going to do. You guys ready? Even if you weren't, I was going to go forward anyways, but nobody's said yes. So are you guys ready for me to do this on a graph right now for people to see? Somebody say yes.
Sure.
Woo-hoo! Here we go. All right. So, hey, look, it's graph. You see that graph right there? Here's what we're going to do. First thing that I'm going to do is write out an equation, and then we're going to talk about how do we take that equation and make it work on here again. So first thing, y equals 2/3 x plus 1. All right. Always and forever, you always start with your zero term. So this one right here is always your first thing. It's +1, so we're going to use the point 0, 1. That is our y-intercept. And Uzziah, don't start bringing up theories of relativity down here. I don't want to see that business. Okay, 0, 1. Boom. That's our first place to start. All right. After I have my first place to start, now I got to deal with my slope, which is this number right here. So off on the side here, I'm going to write change in y over change in x, because that's our slope. And I'm going to write this fraction directly next to it. So we're going to have 2/3, because we took it directly from this number right here. Now, the change in y is 2. Y is up and down. That has a positive number, so I'm going to be going up 2. The change in x is 3. That means I'm going to be using this number. It's positive. I'm going to go to the right 3. So basically, from my starting value, this is all I got to do. Up 2, 1, 2, over 3, 1, 2, 3. Then I'm just going to keep doing that until I run out of graph. Up 2, over 3, up 2, over 3. And that seems like that's kind of as far as I'm going to get here. I got 4 points. It's plenty. And so here's all I got to do. Draw a nice happy line through there. Got our graph. We're good. All right, y'all. I need you to ask me any questions about this. And yes, Uzziah, energy does equal mass times the speed of light squared, but I don't want us to talk about that. I want us to talk about this. What do we got? Is there any questions on this? Where did my stuff come from? Do I have a question about where the 1 came from? A question as to what the 2/3 was? Any of that stuff? Nothing? All right, so hold on a second because I want to show you something real quick. I'm going to do a different share, And we're going to look at delta math for just a second to make sure you understand what the expectation of this is going to look like when we're doing this. So when I do this, oh, that'll work. I'll use this one. So this is actually our assignment. We're going to be writing the quick graphing lines from equations. It's going to look just like this. And this is what we're going to be going through. So when we're going to be talking about graphing the line with this equation, we got to go through the same process that we went through just a second ago to make sure we see what's going to happen. Okay. Now, and what I'm seeing, Uzziah said the 1 is where we start on the y, rise over run is 2 over 3, so up 2 over 3, and that's it. That's exactly right. This one, it's the same idea, unless it's a negative, which we're going to deal with here. We start with this 6, which means that our point is going to be 0, 6. That is on here, and we're going to start right there. That is my 0, 6. Now, we got all these here. Here's the part about this that I want to make sure we understand. That -2 is a whole number. When we think about what it's going to look like, the -2 exists as the top part of our fraction, okay? This is harder to do. I'm going to try to do something real quickly, and it may or may not work, so we're going to see. So I'm going to draw this, and I'm going to say, so we got this -2 right here, right? We got that guy, which means if we're going to write this as a change in y, wow, this is awful to write. Holy cow, over a change in x, this is like the sloppiest looking like kindergarten handwriting, like I've got a crayon in my toes that I've ever done, but it's okay. So -2, I need to write this as a fraction. So what will I be putting that -2 over if I'm going to be doing a slope? Yep, over 1 is absolutely right. Anytime you have a whole number here, whether it's positive or negative, you always put it over 1 because your change in y is going to be the top, your change in x is going to be the bottom. So let's think about this. If the change in y is -2, that means I'm going to be going down 2 in the y direction. If the change in x is a +1, I'm going to be going to the right 1 because 1 in the positive direction for x is this way. So if I'm going to do that, let's see if this will let me go back. If I'm going to do that on here from my original point, well, let's think. Down 2, 1, 2, over to the right 1, boom, it's right here. Now let's look at that. If I click that, down 2, to the right 1, down 2, to the right 1. This gets all of these points. So that should be a good graph of this one. We started at 0, 6, boom, down 2 to the right 1. We kept doing that. It would keep going on this line. So if I submit this answer, sure you want to submit that answer? Yes. Boom. That's exactly right. Now, with that being said, please understand, I realize how ugly some of this stuff can be. I just want to make sure that you guys are on the same page with how we do some of this stuff. So the -2 over 1, starting with the y-intercept of 6, making sure we follow through with this. That's what we're going to be talking about. So here's what I want to do. I think we're in relatively decent shape right now. We got 11 minutes left. I haven't gone the other direction yet, though. So I want to make sure we're okay. How many of you guys are feeling okay? How many of you guys have any questions about anything at all? Because I'm happy to answer them. I just want to do it now if you guys need it. Who's like not sure where I got from something? Who needs more examples like that? Where are we at? Okay, I got an I'm feeling okay. Anybody else? Because I'm going to try something else a little different for a minute. What we didn't do last week is work backwards. And so what I want to try to do, and it's going to be, in terms of doing this, if I did it in person, I know what this would look like. Doing this over, doing this remotely, this may not be as pretty, and that's okay. Because I think you guys seem to be fairly forgiving if I screw something up on here. I'm going to try to do this on a graph here and have us create the equation ourselves by working backwards. Now, the process is not bad, but this is definitely something that it takes a second. And Chandler, I promise we'll talk about WandaVision again later, but not yet. So here's what I want us to do. Yeah, let's do this. I'm going to make a couple points here. And I'm going to draw this line. And then I'm going to say, how the heck are we going to figure out what the equation of this line is as we go through here? So there we go. We got a place that's right there. Right now, I need two numbers, okay? I'm going to find the equation of this line. I know for a fact it's going to be y equals. I know that there's going to be some number here in front of the x. And I know that I'm going to have some number right there. So I've got two things that I have to fill in. Does anybody here know what either of these values might potentially be? And if you have one, I want you to kind of throw it out there in the chat so I can see what it is that you've got and we can figure out where it comes from. Okay? Who's got a number that they can put in here? All silence. Look at this line. There are two numbers that we need. And I can tell you which one I would go with first, but I want to see if you guys had an idea. Nobody's typing anything. Oh, there we go. Chandler already threw out a slope up 1 over 3, and that is a great thing for us to think about. If we look at how we go from point to point, no matter where it's at on this line, we're making what we call a slope triangle. And Uzziah, I'm going to get to yours in a second. So right now, we make the slope triangle to figure out what we're doing. We went up 1 and we went over 3, up 1 over 3, and it continues to be that way. So if I know that I'm going to be going up 1 and over 3 for my slope, that is the number that I'm going to put in front of the x, because your slope always goes right here. So I'll even write that. That is your slope, up 1 over 3. So 1/3 x. This right here is your y-intercept, or your zero term. And Uzziah, that is where you came up with yours. If we look, it's where we cross the y-axis. Right there, that is our point 0.03, which means this number here has to be a positive 3. So our equation for this line is y is equal to 1/3 x plus 3. Now, I'm going to tell you what I would do with something like this. If it's just going to be me putting this together, I generally start with this number because I know it's always where it crosses here. And then I use that to figure out what my slope is. And so, Chandler, the fact that you got up 1 over 3, it made it easier for us to put that number there. But it doesn't matter which one we do as long as you have a place to kind of figure out where it's at. Now, I'm going to make another one, and then I'm going to show you this on Delta Math. And then we might talk about Wand division close to the end here, but I do want to make sure that we can see this. So again, looking at your line, you have to find your y-intercept, or where it crosses the y-axis. And then you have to use the slope triangle to figure out what your slope is to put up in front of the x. So I'm going to put the general format up here first. We know it's y equals something in front of our x plus something here. So that is our slope. That is our y-intercept. And I'm going to do, oh gosh, let's do this. Take me a second to kind of get them all marked on here. It's kind of a lot. All right, so that gives us our general graph going up like this. And the part that I will ask first, what is the y-intercept for this line? Where is the place where it crosses the y-axis? What's that number? Anyone? -3, absolutely correct. If I look here, -3 is the number that I have here. Now, I am going to make that as a -3 as opposed to a plus -3. You're absolutely right. So now we got to figure out our slope. And you figure out the slope by just finding points that are next to each other and figuring out how many you went up, how many you went over. So if we're looking at that, I'm going to take these two. I'm going to make sort of a mark, and I'm just going to keep doing that. Up 2 over 1 is absolutely right. And that's the same for each of these. Up 2 over 1, up 2 over 1. So up 2 over 1 means that that is going to be the fraction that I'm going to put here in front of the x. That is my slope. Now, there's a little bit of simplification here. We have it written down. Mathematically, this is perfect. But what I tend to do if I'm going to rewrite this is I'm going to say, all right, we have this general idea. 2 over 1 means I don't have to write it with that 1 on the bottom. So I could say y equals 2 over 1x is the same as 2x. Because remember, we talked about going backwards with that. If I make a slope, I do over 1. If I want to write it as an equation, I don't have to put the 1 on the bottom. Plus this -3, I could just write this as -3. That gives me the entire equation. This is the simplest way of writing this thing right here. So what we have right here, we should be fine. All right. So with that being said, let's figure it out. Let's figure out how we're going to make this work. So this is kind of where we're at. I want to give you guys a chance to see this on the Delta Math format, and then we'll see what happens. And maybe one division, yes, possibly. All right, so we got this one. This is not what we want. Let's go back and let's take a look at, come on now, writing equations of lines. Let's see what we have. Dear God, please don't let this be difficult. Ah, perfect. All right, same general idea. So when we look at this, we know right now that our y-intercept is at that -7. So right now, what I'm going to do is type down here, y equals blah, 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 something x. I got a -7. I know there's going to be a -7 in there because that's where this part is. Now let's think about, what does our slope look like? So if I look at this, how far up and over am I going between these points? How many up, how many over? Up how many, over how many? Up how many, over how many? Anyone? 1 over 3 up. That's exactly right. We always put the up on the top. So if I'm going to do that, that means I'm going to have a 3 on the top of my fraction and a 1 on the bottom of my fraction. So it's going to be 3 over 1. Whoops, hold on. 3. Come on, back down here. 3 over 1 x, because I always have the slope in front of the x. And then that -7 is right down here. Now, here's the thing. What I would say about this that I think is kind of important is they may want us to write it just as a 3, but I would probably say that this is an okay way for us to write it. We've got the slope in front of the x. We've got the y-intercept there with the -7. Let's see what it gives us. Do you want that answer? Yes. Awesome. So it took it, even though we didn't have that reduced. It also does it this way, which is kind of crazy. So they took any 2 points to find the rise and the run. We got 1 minute. That's totally fine. So we have a 15 over 5, which is crazy. And they reduced that to 3 over 1. So they did 3 over 1x -7 or 3x -7. Should be good. Now, here's what I want us to do now. Tomorrow, I'm going to talk more about this one. And I think I might give you guys a real short quiz over some of this just to see where we're at. But what I want to do right now is I'm going to stop the recording.